more that we can share the story of people living with this disease and let people know what it's really like, that hopefully we can get some more support and one day have a day without ALS.
Hello and welcome to Connecting ALS. I am one of your hosts, Mike Stevenson, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host on the East Coast, Jeremy Holden. Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, Mike.
How are things in North Carolina this week?
Yeah, pretty good. No complaints. I don't know if you've seen, but there's some concerns that the COVID numbers are going in the wrong direction. So we're all kind of waiting with bated breath to see what the next step is on rolling back any of those phase 2 reopenings, or if we're going to kind of hold steady for a little while and see what happens. But we're doing fine here and, just trying to stay safe and stay responsible.
Right. It'll be interesting to see because here in the United States, each state is doing things a little bit differently in terms of how they reduce restrictions during the pandemic. And we are already starting to see, after a month or so of that happening, increased cases in a few of those spots and considerations for re-implementing some of those restrictions. So I'm sure it'll be back and forth and some trial and error as we go, but very much still a story that is top of everyone's mind. And we talked a little bit about that with our guest today, your fellow North Carolina resident, Mr. Larry Falivena. And Larry is someone who is living with ALS, and since his diagnosis has done a ton for the ALS community, raising awareness and funding. And he most recently joined the ALS National Board of Trustees at the association, and has really gone the extra mile in terms of how he's fighting this disease. And of course, he has a large stake in it, but it was great to talk to him about some of that.
It was, Mike. And boy, you say went the extra mile, but really went extra hundreds of miles last summer, traveling. I'm sure a lot of our listeners paid attention at the time that Larry went to every one of Major League Baseball stadiums across the country, caught a game, and in most of those cities brought a person with ALS who was also a fan of the hometown team and got to know that person, shared stories, and really did his part to elevate those stories of people living with ALS and caught some ball games along the way. But a really great tour that he put together last summer to kind of help elevate the profile of this disease.
Yeah, and we talked to him about his reflections on that time and what it meant to him and kind of some of his findings from that. And we're here as this episode comes out on the eve of Lou Gehrig's birthday, and we talked to Larry about that as well, what Lou's legacy has meant to him and really the whole ALS community. So it was a great conversation. We don't want to keep you from it. Let's listen to Larry Falivena now.
We are joined today by Larry Falivena. Larry is a member of the ALS Association's Board of Trustees and was diagnosed with ALS in 2017. Larry, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Larry, this time last year, you were in the early stages of your quest to visit every major league ballpark in America and in Canada in order to raise awareness of ALS. I just want to reflect back on that trip, some of the people that you met along the way, and your thoughts and reflections on the Challenge Larry campaign.
It was an amazing experience. I honestly can't believe it was a year ago. We kind of celebrated starting that trip here just a week ago. And the baseball was great. I enjoyed visiting all the ballparks. It was an amazing experience with my family, being able to tour the country, even Canada, see so much of the United States. But really, the baseball tour was kind of the vehicle that allowed me to meet with other people who'd been affected by this disease and get to share their stories. And that was the exciting part for me. I was honored to be able to do that. And when I look back on that now, there were just so many incredible experiences, at the games, seeing the country, but just meeting people. For example, like Karen and Tony Vick, who went to the Royals game with me. They're a young couple. Tony has served 15 years in the military, and the ALS kind of, struck him down at a young age. But just seeing their faith, seeing their love for each other, and how that's helping them overcome the hardships of this disease was really inspirational for me as someone who's also facing ALS. But I think, that story's inspirational for anyone. And when I went to Atlanta, that was the last stop on my tour. A man I met, Andre, had actually been working for the Braves for 15 years and living with ALS for 11 years. And he was really just the toughest person mentally I've ever met. He just simply refused to let ALS stop him. He was still working at the Braves, and despite what ALS had done to his body, he just, refused to give up. So I would just encourage people, if you weren't able to follow along with the tour last year, please visit my social media pages. You can go to Facebook at Larry's Challenge ALS MLB Tour, or Instagram at Larry Challenge ALS, and just go back and read those stories of these incredible people. I guarantee it will brighten your day.
Absolutely. It was such a really thoughtful idea and so well put together by you, Larry. And I know so many people that you met with really appreciated you sharing your journey and taking a ball game with them. It was a meaningful way to connect and to come together over something that is really important to a lot of people. And Major League Baseball holds a special place in the hearts of many Americans and of course, many of those living with ALS. And Lou Gehrig's name is synonymous with the disease, of course. And you mentioned that trip around the U.S., visiting the different ballparks, was in part inspired by Lou Gehrig. And we're talking today, just a few short days before his birthday. Can you tell us a little bit about what Lou's legacy means to you and why it continues to inspire so many today?
Yeah, I think it does inspire a lot of people. And we're coming up on his birthday, but unfortunately, we just also passed the anniversary of his death on June 2nd. But, I think Lou Gehrig brought ALS into the spotlight. His name became synonymous with the disease, unfortunately. But I think he was the right person to sort of be the, I don't know what you want to say, the advocate for that disease, for so many years, even though he had already passed. I think his story is so inspiring because here's a man who never gave up, right? He was already called the Iron Horse because of, setting that record for consecutive games. And he didn't let the disease stop him either. Even after he had to stop playing baseball, he became a civil servant. So he just didn't let the disease beat him. And I think I saw that in so many of the people that I met, really, all the people that I met while I was on the tour last summer, that they just weren't going to let the disease beat him. I think the other thing about Lou, what struck people so hard was, here's a man who was just a good human being. He was very likable, and in spite of his incredible talent, he was also very humble. And again, I think those were attributes that I saw in all the people that I've met who've been struck by ALS as well. They're good people. They appreciate life, and they have, love and hope. And I really think that Lou just kind of embodies the spirit of people who've been struck by this disease. Of course, Lou's legacy has also forever connected ALS and baseball. He's considered the best first baseman to play the game, certainly one of the best hitters to play the game. His record held up for 56 years, and he was just an amazing ball player as well as being a very good person. And I think it would be great to see a league-wide Lou Gehrig Day celebrated across all of MLB. There's so many things about him that I think are good about baseball and good about people.
I couldn't agree more, and we can share in the show notes some information about the efforts to start a Lou Gehrig Day. You mentioned baseball, and I know you're a big fan. Personally, I'm still basking in the glow of the Nationals' improbable World Series win last fall.
You should be.
Yeah, it was it was incredible World Series, and I know I'm biased, but I think that just even a non-Nationals fan, maybe even some Astros fans would recognize that it was just a great fall altogether. But we're deep into June now without any baseball to watch, and I know with everything going on in the world, my inability to watch a baseball game at the end of the day is small and insignificant. But reflect a little bit as a fan on just baseball and what it means and why it's so important, and maybe make me feel a little less guilty that I miss it so much this summer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss it, and certainly there are some very important things going on in the world right now that need our attention. But, people will say that baseball is just a game. We've certainly seen that baseball is also a business. But I think baseball matters because it's just so intertwined into the history of America. It's a uniquely American sport. Certainly it has its blemishes as much as any parts of American history, but it also has some just incredible history as well. Things that have brought generations together. I know for me, I have fond memories of watching the Braves on TV with my dad. We didn't have a team in Florida at the time. And I think a lot of people have memories of, going to the ballparks with their families, celebrating July 4th, eating a ballpark dog, watching, fireworks. It's just part of our American history. And the other great thing about baseball, I think, or one of them anyway, is that, you have statistics going back all the way to Lou Gehrig's days, right? So that you can actually compare players across time and, who really was the best first baseman. And, you can say the bats have changed, the balls have changed, et cetera. But I think being able to just go back across all of that history of baseball and relate the past to today, I think makes it special as well.
That's very, very true. A huge part of so many of our lives. And it's a little bit different to not a little bit. It's very different to not have that going on so far this summer. It sounds like they're getting closer in negotiations to perhaps start playing again, but I'm sure that will change in the days to come, much like many other things in the world with the pandemic still affecting us all globally. This episode also scheduled to air just a few days before Father's Day, Larry. If you don't mind, can you tell us what Father's Day looks like in the Falivena household, and if there are any traditions that you typically partake in on that day? And if so, have you had to alter those plans at all since ALS came into your life?
I have 2 teenage boys. I've been blessed by the fact that the progression of ALS for me has been slower than most. So they've been able to kind of adapt over time. I would say the things that have changed is not being able to do the physical side of things that we used to do, but I'm still able to, these days I guess I really can't go out to a restaurant, but the deal was Daddy gets to pick wherever he wants to eat. So that part was cool. I guess I'll have to do takeout this year.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a lot of it is the same. And I just appreciate the fact that I get to have another Father's Day and spend it with my family. So I'll be thankful for that, no matter what has changed or even as things continue to change.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're gearing up toward a great weekend and a great day. So happy to hear that. Larry, I mentioned it at the outset, but you recently accepted a role on the ALS Association's board of trustees. What inspired you to serve the association?
The ALS Association is the leading organization supporting those affected by ALS. And I really like the approach that the association takes of not only providing millions of dollars to research to find treatment and a cure, but also making sure that people like myself and thousands of others have the ability to live with the disease and have their most fulfilling life. And there's so many things that go into that, but it's been almost 3 years since my diagnosis. I hope it's going to be many more, and I want the ability to live the best life that I can. And on top of that, also, the association is our voice in government, helping to secure funding, advocating for legislation that benefits everyone fighting this disease. And I wanted to be a part of that because I felt like I could have an impact across so many different areas by serving with the association.
That's definitely true. Your voice and influence are going to have a major impact on the ALS community, Larry, and that's apparent really in everything you do. Hearing you speak at a conference earlier this year, just the way that you talk about pushing for a cure and advocating and staying connected as a community, that's going to mean so much to many families living with ALS. So thank you for being willing to join the board of trustees. It's a big commitment, and like I said, it's going to make a big difference for a lot of people. So thank you for that. Before we wrap up, we were talking a little bit a few minutes ago about the pandemic and COVID-19. And for individuals and families living with ALS, we've heard from some of them that it has added a layer of anxiety because many folks living with ALS find themselves isolated already. And now with the fear of exposure to COVID, needing to stay inside and reduce their exposure risk as much as possible has meant further isolation. You're in North Carolina. and as is Jeremy. And I know that that state is opening up a little more than some others have. And recently, in the past few weeks, there's been an uptake in positive tests for COVID there. How is your situation personally, and really how is the pandemic impacting your life?
Yeah, I think on top of everything else you have to think about in dealing with disease, having another layer now of, I wouldn't say worrying, but just being anxious about that other layer, right? Taking precautions. Again, I think for me, because my progression has been slow, I'm not facing the things that many others with this disease are, as you mentioned, already isolated, already dealing with that sort of feeling of being disconnected, and now having to deal with the fact that maybe your caregiver can't come to your home, or your grandkids, your family, can't come to visit you. It's just another layer of things to be concerned about on top of everything else you have to deal with ALS. Just like I said, Father's Day dinner, this year it's going to be takeout, or it's going to be something, that we make at home.
Right.
It's just being cautious. It's kind of a fine line. It's being cautious and not being foolish, but also not being afraid to live your life. And so it's just kind of a weird place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know for a lot of folks, it's a lot worse. So I don't want to complain about it. It's just with everything else that ALS throws at you, to have to be concerned about that as well. It's just another layer.
Thank you, Larry Falivena, for joining us today to talk about so many things with so much insight. We really appreciate having you on.
I really appreciate being here. I appreciate having the opportunity to share those stories. Like I said, if you visit my social links, just go back and take a look at the lives of the people who are living with this disease and the fantastic attitudes they have. And with everything else going on right now, hopefully that'll brighten your day.
Thank you, Larry. We'll definitely put your social links in our show notes as well, so people can check out those stories. Thanks for everything you do, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Well, thank you again to Larry Falivena, a member of the ALS Association's National Board of Trustees, and of course, the star of last summer's Challenge Larry Tour of Major League Ballparks. Really great conversation, and can't thank him enough for giving us a look into his life and how he's taking his fight to ALS and really helping to raise the profile of this disease.
Larry is a wonderful human being, and it's always nice to talk to him and hear about how he's doing and his plans for continuing to advocate and raise awareness for those like himself fighting for ALS. So yeah, thanks again to Larry. It was also nice to talk about baseball again. I know we're not able to watch any baseball at the moment, but even just the conversation was comforting for me anyway, Jeremy.
Yeah, I agree. And we mentioned the fact that in the grand scheme of things, not being able to watch a baseball game isn't that consequential, right, but it's meaningful. And also interesting to hear about Larry and his family's plans for Father's Day this weekend. Yeah. It's a good opportunity for us to wish a happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there listening at home.
Definitely. I hope everyone has a safe and wonderful weekend celebrating Father's Day. That's going to do it for this episode of Connecting ALS. You can find all of our episodes and the most recent content at connectingals.org. We would appreciate it if you headed there and subscribed. You can also subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, on TuneIn or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. You can find Connecting ALS there. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Provide any feedback or questions you have for us there. This episode was produced by Garrett Tiedemann of the ALS Association's Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota chapter. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We will connect with you again soon.